the business school is going to rate students at the end of a project. Indeed, at every major stage of a project, we're going to rate the students on whether the client is accepting your student group as effective professional advisors. Do you have any tips for simple ways in which to judge how well the client thinks about the group in a meeting?
So as you know, we have this concept of smiling and nodding, which is where the client may smile and may be very positive about the student group, apparently, but actually they've not understood correctly what the students were saying, and the students haven't understood correctly what the client's saying. So actually there may be a disconnect, and this may come out horribly at the final presentation. But it's a common fact that clients are very polite people, and they very rarely actually say to students, to their face, this wasn't very good. They understand that students are students, and they want to sort of protect the student self-esteem. Now, there are occasions when that doesn't happen, the client lays into you, so then you know that you haven't pleased the client. But there can be a number of presentations where students give what they think is a great presentation, and the client is very positive in the room and says, thank you, that was a great presentation. But when the group's left the room, the story that the supervisors get is a very different one about it really didn't meet what I wanted, it hasn't addressed the business issue, and so on. Now, broadly, you can divide student performance into three categories. Firstly, there is transformational, great stuff that really does what we want it to do, and the client's very happy. Secondly, there's some useful information that the client will use, but it's kind of missed that transformational stage. And then thirdly, actually, frankly, it's not usable. It was a bit of a waste of time. The client may actually wish they hadn't started on the project. Now, as a student group, you can actually tell often from the questions the client asks you at the presentation which one of those three you fall into. So, starting at the top, if what you've done is truly transformational, the client will ask you questions taking for granted what you've concluded and what you've recommended, and actually trying to move on and trying to work out how would that apply in their business, or how could they take it to a different place that you haven't covered in the study. So that's really good feedback when they're actually asking you as a kind of trusted advisor, really, what would you do? Can you give us more information that would help? Secondly, if you're in the somewhat useful category, then probably the client has some doubt about what you've done. They're not quite sure of your method and your data. They don't quite trust you to the level of trusted advisor. And probably what you'll get there is a lot of questioning, which might be quite difficult questioning, quite hard questioning, where they're really trying to find out exactly how well you have done, how solid your recommendations are. So if you get grilled, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It means that what you've done is of some interest to the client, because if they weren't interested at all in your findings, they wouldn't bother to grill you. And that's what happens to the third category of student, where the questions are much more along the lines of, how was the project for you? Did you have a nice time? How was your trip to Mexico? Those kind of questions, or no questions at all. That would tend to suggest that actually the client isn't interested, it hasn't grabbed their interest, and really they're thinking it was a bit of a waste of time on the project. So that would be, I would encourage students to kind of look at their client and just note what they hear back in the questioning. That will give a pretty good sense at presentations of how they've done in the client's eyes.